Hello, everyone. How do you feel after the lunch? Relaxed? Refreshed? Yeah, that's good. So the topic I want to speak about today with you is the automated security scanning. So this is not fully related to testing, checking, and the whole division between one and another. So a few words about me. So I'm currently a test consultant at Objectivity. It's a UK-based organization. I'm a public speaker, like giving talks on different conferences through Europe, and I'm a security enthusiast. Like for the last 4 years, I was involved in a project which was fully related with the payment industry. So we were part of a call center offered as a service in which you were able to pay with your credit card through a web page or through your mobile phone or your landline or whatever you want to use. And most of the talk I'm giving to you right now is related with the stuff that I was doing in the last 4 years. A bit of it is connected with what I'm trying to do currently in my organization. So I try to enable the same solution that I want to show to you. So the things that we will discuss today is why security is so important, how hard is it to start. So if your organization doesn't have like a security testing division or a team connected with it or with the single responsibility only around the security testing, how hard it is or how difficult, how many challenges you will face to start doing the security scanning, how to run automated scanners. We will use as an example as OWASP ZAProxy. What are the required investments to enable it in the project that you might be working in? What will be the main benefits? And if we'll have the time, I will present to you some alternative options. So in the main part of my presentation, I will focus around the automation being done through a WebDriver, through Selenium. And then the OWASP Zap will be the security scanner that we'll be using. But there are some alternative tools, alternative ways how to integrate the automation with the security scanning. And this is something that I want to show you that it's pretty easy and it doesn't require additional tools, expensive licenses. It doesn't require, I don't know, spending half a year on trainings. You can start doing it just by few changes in the testing activities that you perform in your project, and then you can investigate how secure your application is, and then decide how big investment you want to make to be able to make it more secure. So, how many of you feel like security is currently important? Like, not only that it's a hot topic and a buzzword and everybody mentions it, but it's really, really important that every product, every application that you make should be secure. Hands up. Good. So I strongly believe that every organization that has software delivery or product delivery inside their scope of portfolio, they should focus around the security testing, security scanning, testing, whatever you call it. They should build an image for a customer how secure the application is, and what are the risks that he's having if he's releasing a new version to production, which is not security tested or not fixed on vulnerabilities that can be found during a scanning. So one of the reasons why we do it is because of data integrity and management. So there's a lot of discussion around enabling other people to view your personal data. So in the European Union, there's a huge focus around the GDPR and other solutions around it. In the US, they've got their own standards, and everybody are focused about making sure that the data is protected, and there is no way to handle that data by unauthorized people. There are some issues that happens, like, for example, Yahoo lost like millions of logins and passwords and date of births and name and surname data for their own mailbox customers. But every company currently is focused about having that data integrity and management of that data to be private because it's very risky to enable anybody to use it. There is a huge economic impact around the cybersecurity attacks. So if some countries getting an attack, there was at the beginning of healthcare.gov in the US. So Obama was starting like a huge project, and they were like cyber attacking it, and it has multiple downtimes. And then suddenly the whole project was blocked just because it was not secure enough, and there was too much risk about the data that it's handling, that it's got all the diseases history of the people living in the US and all other stuff. And there is the whole IoT and digitalization of our daily life, which hugely impacts everything that we do. So the biggest connection between those two is, do you remember like a year ago, there was a moment when most of the Western US hosted applications were down, like Facebook, Google, Spotify, everything almost went down. So there was an attack being made through the cameras that were inside the US cities. There was some Chinese organization that was providing those cameras, and they made a huge botnet out of them, and then attacked many AWS instances on the western coast of the US. And most of the servers went down. And the funny thing was that the first thing that happened after the attack was successful, there was a remote upgrade of the firmware on all of those cameras, just covering up all the tracks about who was owning the attack. And that was a connection between the IoT, like those cameras, that was like surveillance in different cities, versus the digitalization. Every data that we have on Facebook and the other places, it went down, maybe got robbed, some of them, we don't know, but there are no clear confirmation that some of them did. So this is something that makes really important that security should be handled and it should be focused on. So the biggest challenges. Have you ever tried to discuss in your organization that you want to start security testing? How many of you succeed? Oh, there is one. That's nice. So the most common responses that I feel I had in the past is that domain knowledge is huge and we don't have an experience. So the assumption is either you are an expert in a security and we can start doing security, or you are not an expert, so we don't have experience, so we will not start doing it because we get like a risk of getting embarrassed or getting like challenged by the customer. And that's why some organizations just refused starting security scanning. Then some people like CSO, it's like security officer, yeah. So they've got like an idea, let's take an external expert. Let's bring him to our organization and he will be doing security testing. So then somebody asks about the pricing, and such an expert costs like huge load of money for a week of work. So no, it's too expensive. We won't take the experts. So another idea, let's start doing it. Just don't try to, I don't know, estimate how much does it cost. Just use the people we've got, ask them to do the security scanning, and then if they find any vulnerabilities, they will learn based on the results. So then there's like response, no, this also costs a large amount of money, like tools, the processes, the project time that we need to include. This is all too heavy. Let's skip it, let's don't do it. And that's usually the moment when even if you want to be like an enthusiast or enabling the security in your project, you just said, oh, okay, I will keep my functional testing or test automation, and I will not move to this area because there's no support from the organization, and I don't know how to convince them that they should allow me to do it. But every organization, if you're a functional tester, if you're doing the automation or any other thing, they always give you some small amount of time for like your self-learning. You can spend, I don't know, 3 hours a day, a week. 3 hours a week or half an hour a day. And you can do it through reading the blogs or doing some other stuff. So my idea would be, I want to give you some example of connecting the test automation that you currently have with one of the possible security scanners, and you can use this small amount of time just to scan your software, check the vulnerabilities, and learn about them in that tiny free slot for self-upskilling. If you find something really serious, you can just grab it and go to your project manager or technical lead or whoever it is in your project and just show it to them. There's like high risk vulnerability in our application. Can we just sort it out? Can we solve it, fix it, investigate it? And then maybe if you find few of those, you will get additional time to learn the security, to expand your knowledge, to perform the security testing as a part of the project delivery, not as a part of your free time. And then it might end up with building a whole security testing division. In my previous company, that's how it ends up. So we were doing this module for the call center to handle the payments, and we had to be PCI DSS compliant. And there was an audit every year that was running through 2 weeks. And for our team, it was meaning that there was like 2 weeks of overtime, sometimes testing through the night, huge escalation meetings, and all the risks needed to be solved inside the 1 week. And we decided that we need to do something about it. Like, the whole year of development is not fun enough that the fed up that we get from this 2 weeks of audit. So we wanted to feel like secure before the audit, and one of the ideas was that in my free time I was running those security scanners, and suddenly if we invested our time, we grab and solve the issues that we found, then the next audit was finished after 3 days. We just provide the auditor with the results of our scanners, with the fixes that we applied, and he said, yeah, that's okay. That's compliant with everything that I've got in my PCI DSS. I will just review functional testing of your application with similar tool behind it, and if it doesn't find anything additional, then the audit is finished. And we turned out to be PCI compliant for the next years very easily, without any overtime hours, without any last time fixes, deployments, retesting. I never had to spend a night in the office anymore. So it was fun. So what is like a security scanner? So at least there are 2 popular scanners that I'm aware of. It's the OWASP ZAProxy, and it's the Burp Suite. So it's a tool that behaves as a proxy for your web browser. So if you have something like the functional tests in a WebDriver, so the functional test that checks all the steps through user interface of the web browser, and then you've got like a OWASP ZAProxy. This is a proxy that takes all the movement between the your tests and the web browser. So it is like a man in the middle. It's analyzing all the movement from the both sides, and then based on it, it can then perform any additional tests around the security of the application. So the thing that you have to do to get the final solution is just to connect those 2 engines in an effective way, and it's pretty easy. You just need to configure your web browser to use a proxy. That's it. So if you do it, then, for example, if you have a Firefox and a ZAProxy and the website, it goes in the middle, it analyzes all the movement, and it gives you results, like the live results. You don't have to run any additional scans. Like the first level of results is something that happens live while you are clicking on a web page. So you can do manual testing, like exploratory session, anything you want to, but you can also run some automated checks. Like from a perspective of the functional, it doesn't care about the perspective of the functional checking. So even if your automated tests fail, Zap doesn't care. Zap is only collecting all the movement of the network and analyzing it. So even if it's like, if it clicks on the web page and it runs some business cases or business scenarios, and it fails at the last step, it still scans the whole movement that you made through this test. So this tool, OWASP Zap, is supported by the OWASP organization. So this is like an open source organization that has several projects in which they support everything that helps people build a more secure software. It is fully internationalized to 25 languages. It has a lot of built-in features, like it has intercepting proxy, it has automated scanner, which is an active scanner, and it has a passive scanner, which is a real-time scanning machine that runs when you are clicking on a web page. The active scanner is something additional, so you may choose different types of attacks that should be performed and how heavily it should scan your application, and then you just leave it with the session from your automation tests for a few hours, and then it performs a lot of more security checks. It's got a plugin-based architecture, so there's like internal marketplace that provides a lot of plugins and additional extensions. So when you are trying to check how secure is your login and password site, then you can grab some, how it's called, like dictionaries. So it's got dedicated dictionaries for different languages. And you can check if somebody is using like dictionary password instead of random track of digits or chars. This is an example how it looks like. So in the left top corner, you've got like a UI of the application. You've got all the posts, get messages, headers, content. And in the lower place of this first top image, you've got like a list of findings, like there are 4 alerts, and if you click on any of those, then you've got much more details. Like in the bottom right corner, there's an example of a vulnerability, that application error disclosure gives additional information to attacker about what's hidden behind the application. So usually when there's some finding, you've got the URL, you've got the pattern of the attack, you get the recommendation how to fix it. So the first step when you start doing the scans of your own inside your company, the first step is to provide a solution instead of providing a problem. So OWASP Zap gives you recommendation how to fix the problem. So you can go to the project manager, you can go to the developer, and you can show them not only the bug or the security vulnerability that you found, but you can also give them some recipe how it could be fixed that will enable them to easily estimate how much time does it cost. And then you, for a moment, feel like an expert. Like you go to them, you say, I found SQL injection, this is the place, this is the pattern, and this is how you fix it. And this is provided to you by the application instead of investing additional time. There is small risks regarding that scanners that are fully automated provide a lot of false positives. False positives means that the application is raising a security issue which actually doesn't exist in a system. So for example, it exists in a web browser, but behind the web browser there is a database, and database might be secured. So even if it shows on a web browser it's possible to run an SQL injection, you cannot destroy anything in a database by it. So my developers, that was the first moment when I was not an expert. My developers made a rule that anything that goes through a web page is treated as a plain text. So even if I provided a successful SQL injection attack, it was still stored in a database, but it was in a plain text form, so it was not able to run any SQL command out of it. So the ZAProxy was showing me that there is an SQL injection in my application. I went to the developers and said, there's an SQL injection. Can you please sort it out? And they said, no, there isn't. And that's the moment when the fun begins for many of the testers. So that's the moment when you are not checking, but you are really testing. Because you've got the pattern, you've got the place where possibly you can do an SQL injection, and you need to try it. So you try the attack, and the whole web page reloads, and it collects all the data. So you think, yeah, I did it. I've got the SQL injection. And then suddenly you go to any SQL tool that you are using, you open the same table that you, inside your attack, you just mentioned drop table, for example, and it still exists. It doesn't disappear. So what's wrong? And then you go through the records and you find your record, and that there is this drop table as a plain text in one of the columns. And you know that this is the way how developers fix the issue. So then you are really learning about how the security works, that there are false positives, that there are different types of attack. You try to do them, and then you got the results. Sometimes it gets tricky. Sometimes you might destroy the database, because developers are pretty sure that the SQL injection doesn't exist, and it works. So I've got a friend of mine who wanted to train around the security testing, and there was no dedicated server for it. And somebody in the organization said, oh, we are pretty secure. We've got one of the instances on production that has a low level of clients on it. Can you use it? And he made a SQL injection successfully. And somebody forgot that there are like different instances for the web pages, but there's like a single database behind all of them. So he destroyed the whole database, like he dropped the whole database for all the instances around the world. And that was like a learning point. So then there was like 5 why analysis, why did it happen, and all the other stuff. And we divided it to 2 different sessions. So the first session was why the tester didn't have a security testing dedicated sandbox to test on. And the second one was why everybody was feeling that they are pretty secure and then lost all the data. So it sounds really easy. It sounds like you install an application, then you combine them, and it works. So what are the main investments? So to enable such a scanner in automation, you have to have an environment. If you run your automated tests locally, then you just install that application, and then combine it with the WebDriver, and it works. If you are using, for example, Jenkins, and Jenkins is running automated tests on different slaves or whatever it is, then you need to install that application as a part of every slave. Or you need to have like a separate machine which will be proxy for all of those slaves. Another thing is currently every web page is moved from HTTP to HTTPS. So one of the things that is tricky, you need to enable HTTPS traffic. So that's a part that I will show you in a minute, how to do it, because it's possible, and you can do it with OWASP Zap. And then what's the impact on the project schedule? That I will show you when we discuss the main benefits that you can get and main investments that you will have to do. So the first thing is about the connection between the OWASP Zap and the WebDriver. So in the Selenium, for example, Selenium 2.0, you just add a few lines. So there's like, when you try to run Firefox as a browser, there's like a single line saying open a new Firefox driver. If you want to do it with a proxy, then you just add a few lines and set the preference to use HTTP and HTTPS proxy, and then you just provide an address and a port. So if it's locally, then it's a local host and the port of which you configure in Zap. If it's remotely, then you show like a remote proxy with this remote port that should be used by Zap to handle all the data. And then you add an option to accept the certificates. It's a bit more tricky with the Selenium 3.0. So I used here as an example the, how was it called? I forgot the name. Mannequin or something? The type of the web driver? Gecko driver, sorry, it's a Gecko driver. So we use the Gecko driver over here, and it's still, you just add HTTP proxy, you add the port, you add the SSL proxy, and then you have to add additional certificates enabled, and the capability for Marionette to accept insecure certificates. If you do it, then you generate certificate from OWASP Zap inside the application. It's really easy. Then you generate it, save it somewhere on a desktop, go to your Firefox instance, add a new certificate, import it, trust it at all the levels, and then you have the tests. And I don't know if you can see it in the smaller window. There is a fully decoded messages of HTTPS that you've got inside your application. So all the HTTPS is being decoded, and again, Zap can analyze it and can find vulnerabilities in it, and only adding the certificate isn't like giving you all the security that the project managers will wish for. And you have like a tool that you can like use these certificates to just make the security scanning. So the question that often goes from project managers and other people, how much does it cost? So the first idea is to say, WebDriver is free, ZAProxy is free, we already got the automation, we just add those 10 lines, and everything works. It's all for free. Yes. And there is some additional costs. So there is the investigation time. So most of the scanners provide you with 60 up to 80% of false positives. And you need to double check them. Sometimes it's like it shows you that you've got 150 SQL injections, and they all use the same pattern, and they all are on the same web page, like a single page. And if you check the first field, you double check, and it turns out that it is secure. So you can write that this pattern of attack on this page is a false positive. In my project, we created a wiki page when we collected all the false positives. So we had to invest, at the beginning, we had to invest like a week. So it was still half of the time that we were investing during the audit. So it was still okay. And we created a list of all the false positives. So when we got the results from a scanner, then usually we went through the false positives list, and we just check how many of them are new findings and how many of them are another version of the existing false positive. If there was something new, we were again double checking it, and then either it turns out to be a false positive, so it was uploaded to the wiki page, or it gets to the project managers for prioritization and fixing. And that's the second cost. So if you find a vulnerability, it causes a project interruption. So I never met like a project manager to who I went and said there's a security issue in your software. And he said, okay, I don't care. Raise a Jira ticket and never ask me again what's the priority on it. So usually it gets the top priority. Usually it interrupts the project. Sometimes it's like you run a scan for 2 days and then there's suddenly a security sprint because so many things needs to be fixed. So this is something that is required from the project side, that they need to understand that possibly they need to have a buffer for an interruption, that those security issues that you find have to be solved. And the third thing is the learning attitude required. So this is something that's mostly related to you if you want to try it. There is a lot of learning that you will do. If you find those results, if you want to double check the false positives in it, you will learn how to double check them. There will be a lot of blogs, a lot of YouTube videos and other places to look for. And you will get like an easy instruction how to double check such a vulnerability, but you need to learn to reuse that instruction in your particular application environment. And you need to have that attitude because there will be usually nobody having the knowledge or the time to help you. They will say, you wanted the security scanning, you got it, you got the results, just retest them. We have something else to do. We are busy. We've got a lot of other responsibilities. But you might wanted to start with developers to try to work with them. Most of them are expected to run as secure applications. Most of them read books like Top 10 Mistakes on Writing, Security Mistakes in Writing Your Own Code or something like this. There are a lot of books, and most of the companies that I worked with, they've got like a mandatory list of books that every developer has to read and apply in every code that they made. So then if you're right at his desk and you said, I'm thinking I've got a security issue, but I need to retest it, but I don't know how, maybe you could help. So usually they want to help you because they don't want to get this bug in Jira and then be responsible for being the person who provide that bug in the application. So it's easier for them to help you to retest, and while you are in the middle of retesting it, they suddenly run to their desk and they just provide the fix. And when you finish retesting and you said, yeah, it's confirmed, and they said, I already got a fix for that, you then don't have to raise a Jira ticket, but you get the result. The fix is being applied and it's ready for production. So I think it's still good, and it gives a much more place for cooperation between the tester and developer, which I feel happens not enough in projects that we work in. It's often like throwing the software over the fence and nobody cares what the tester is doing with it. He just refreshes the Jira page and checks if there are new defects or not. And I've got like an issues when I was raising a Jira ticket with a bug, and then developer arrived at my desk and he asked me, how did I run the feature that he just implemented? Because he couldn't find it in the application, for example. So what's the benefit? So the benefit goes to anybody. So the team benefits because you rise as a security expert. The project is more secure, so everybody are happy. The product is more secure, everybody are happy. You've got like a security scanner results that prove that there are no findings, or that all the findings that there exist were handled, fixed, or everything goes, and the company is happy. Because if there's an audit, like ISO audit, or PCI DSS audit, or any other audit, they can provide the results from the security scanning that their team is doing. And many of those audits have like a mapping between OWASP top 10 and, for example, PCI DSS. And if you're running the scanners from OWASP compliant tool, they can use it as an input for their own audit. They don't have to run the same scans again and again and again. This is something that you can provide and be like a proactive as a company to these external auditors. And this allows them to run the audit faster, and you feel much more secure and prepared for the audit. So yeah, so the main benefits is easy to build an image about the security of your system. So even if you do it internally, you run the scans, you see how many vulnerabilities there are, even if there are false positives or not. If there are like hundreds of high-risk vulnerabilities, you know that the image is not so clear. If there are like non-high, 5 medium vulnerabilities and lots of lows, then you can even try to ignore the lowest risk ones, because most of the auditors will also ignore them. But it builds an image that the software that you are building or your team is building is pretty nice and secure. And you don't feel like if suddenly somebody decides to have an audit, then it will be like 5 days of spending the night in an office, 10 hotfixes, and 20 different release candidates just from the findings of the audit. So you got the starting point for learning and exercising. So this gives you a place where you can run the scanners, and based on the results and the recommendation that scanners gives you, you can expand your knowledge about the security testing. And you got like security-related pipelines. So if you're using CI like Jenkins or Hudson and you combine it with the security scanner, then you can have like 2 different pipelines, like to release a software without the security testing and with security testing. And then you can automate all that happens behind it. You can automate the, so OWASP ZAPs has like not IDE, how it's called, like command line way of operating. So you can trigger different operations in OWASP Zap from a command line, like from a Jenkins tool configuration. You can trigger generating HTML report out of a scan through this command line, and then send it over to your email. So all this security scanning can happen through the night, through the weekend. It doesn't require you to invest additional hours of your daily work to it. You just do it as a part of the integration. So the maximize benefits, the easiest way is to have the build tool. You have the WebDriver, you have the web browser, Zap, and a web application, and all of this works together in some sort of pipeline in Jenkins, Hudson, TeamCity, or whatever tool you use to build the software. And then at the end, you got the results. Sent through an email, provided on a job HTML page, wherever you want to store them. But you can then go to work, and when you have this time, this slot for self-learning, you just open the results, and you just try to learn from them. What are the vulnerabilities that are being found? How do they work? How do they solve? How to convince the project manager that he should take a look on it, and he should provide some solution for it, or he just should be interested and should invest the time for doing it. I think I'm at the moment that probably I will skip the next part, because I wanted to show you some of the alternatives, like only give you a mention about the tool name and the features and the risk behind them. But I already confirmed that I will send over this presentation, and it will be fully available for you. So I will just mention that my company has an objectivity test framework. It's an open source, and you can download it and use it with different continuous integration tools, different automation tools. And it gives you like an easier way to build the integration between the automation and the security scanner. So I believe that we've got like a connection, out-of-the-box connection between TeamCity, for example, WebDriver, and the Burp Suite. But there are like instructions how to do it with different like tools like OWASP Zap or any others. There is an F-Secure project that's called Mitten. And this is a connection between the WebDriver automation and ZAProxy. And recently, or half a year ago, they also enabled something that's called BDD security. So it's a way. How many of you tested using BDD approach? Like the feature files, given, when, then, and other stuff. So the BDD security is an idea. I never tried it. I don't know if it works, but I'm very curious about it. So you are building like a feature file, but around the security testing. It's like, given I run my automation test, when there is a Zap proxy behind it, then set, and there are lists of flags, for example, what sort of attacks should be run as a part of the security scanning. And then you can provide not only the results to your business people from your project, but you can provide them with a feature file which defined what sort of tests and how were run against your application. It is also open source and available on GitHub, so you can try to use it. And there is something that's called Qualys. So Qualys is a security scanner that doesn't use your automation. It costs like a truck of money per license. And the thing that it does is you provide a URL, and it scans everything. It somehow sorts out what are the use cases of the application, what are the possible fields, and how they can be used, and then provides you with a full result. But this application is not open source, it's not free to use, and this is the example of an application from a group of application where you pay thousands of dollars per license yearly, and then have like a limit of 20 scans per year or something like this. And that's it. So I will start with my question to you before you start with your questions. How many of you feel like you want to try it out? Thanks. Thank you very much. Any questions from you?
Hi, thank you very much for your speech. Could you please provide real examples of vulnerabilities which are found by this OWASP Zap tool? Were these on the SQL injections? So real examples from your practice.
Yeah, so we found vulnerabilities like SQL injection in our application. We found cross-site scripting and confirmed that it was there. And we've got several CRSRFs, request forgery attacks. And the good thing was that most of them are pretty easy to retest if you use tool like OWASP Zap, because you've got this attack pattern. So for example, when we found SQL injection, it was showing us which field on a web page was not secure and what data we should provide inside that field to make a successful attack. For this request forgery, from the application window, if you do right-click on this get or post message, in the context menu, you've got like generate SCRF form to attack this page. And it makes a clone of your application. And if you put that data inside this clone, then the data is being processed by your application. So it gives you out-of-the-box proposal how to do it, and similar for the cross-site scripting. It also, from the context menu, gives you an option to try to run a cross-site scripting. And then inside the Zap window, you've got an iframe, which is cross-site scripting the application that's behind it. And you provide the data, and you've got like a pop-up window saying this is a security alert of your application. You know that you made the cross-site scripting. Okay?
Hello, thank you for your report. My question is about the weakest parts in the website, for example, or application, for example, for SQL injections. And as you have already mentioned, URL path can be a weak one too. So my question is that. Can you please answer?
Can you repeat it one more time? I just lost somewhere in between.
Okay, can you please share your opinion about the weakest parts of a website, for example, for SQL injections or some other attacks?
Like a weak place?
Weak places, yeah.
Yeah, so usually like there's any form that you fill in your data, like name, surname, or any other stuff. That's usually the place when all the attacks could happen. So this is the place when you can easily do an SQL injection, just semicolon and add some suffix to it. It also stores the data behind. So you can, usually when it's, I don't know if it's a post or a get type of the sending information, but still you can change the URL and you can do this cross-site scripting inside the URL. Yeah, but usually it's every place where there's any user input. That's the usual places where there's the most vulnerabilities.
I see there at first. I think. Thank you for your presentation. Maybe I didn't hear, just to confirm. Does Zap work with some other browsers? I mean, Safari, Chrome, Internet Explorer, or just with Firefox? So
Zap doesn't care what browser do you use. So when you're running your UI tests inside the WebDriver, you decide which driver you want to use, and you just need to add those lines about accepting the certificates and setting up a proxy. I use Firefox because in Firefox it's the easiest way to do it. Like, it's additional 3 lines. So when you try to do it, for example, in Internet Explorer, sometimes it takes like 20 lines because there's a lot of more capabilities that need to be set up for the browser to enable such a proxy. and these certificates. But there's a lot of like places, blogs, and other articles in which you can search for how to enable a different browser with a proxy.
In such case, maybe there are some differences between security bugs in different browsers, or bugs are the same. So I can run.
Okay. So from the bugs perspective, until I last time used it, the results are the same. So we didn't have any differences. But I know that Google is providing some additional tools and shortcuts for Chrome to make it more secure. So it might be possible that because Chrome already has like a ad blocking functionality, and they also have like security functionalities that doesn't allow. So they recognize if you try to do like cross-site scripting inside the URL address, they can block it without passing it back to the server.
I see that we have a lot of questions, but we don't have a lot of time. So you can ask Mike after this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.